Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here. So in today's video, we are going to see how we create this using a couple of techniques in Cinema 4D, mainly with the Cinema 4D particle system and the volume builder plus the volume measure. But also there's a little bit of more graph in there and some deformer as well. But I'm sure this is fairly easy to use if you understand the basics of Cinema 4D and the particle system. And also by the end of this video, you should be able to learn couple of tricks or techniques in there. So let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will do this. So I'm in Cinema 4D and I'm using Cinema 4D 2025, and you can see already I have a plane and the heart object in my scene. It could be any object that you want, but in this case you are using this as an example, right? And then what we want to do is to emit particles from the plane, which eventually goes up to form the heart shape, right? So let's actually do that. So first of all, let me go ahead and hide the heart, and I'll select the plane and I'll come into my particles simulation, particles emitter, and I'll choose mesh emitter, right? And now if I hit play, see particles are emitting, right? So first of all, I don't like the work plane, so I'll come into the filters now and check work plane, and I'll change the standard interface to a particles interface, which I've already set up. And you can see how I did this in my previous tutorial on morphing the Nike logo into a shoe, right? So now let's come into our mesh emitter, come to particles properties, and I'll change. We don't want any velocity in the I don't want any speed, so I'll set the velocity, the speed to 0, and I'll come to the emission, and I'll increase the rate to like say 8,000, right? For the sake of the tutorial, I wouldn't increase the particles as much as I did in the original, but to give you a fair idea of how the whole thing will work. And now if I hit play, the particles will be emitting. You can see it's emitting and it's not moving, right? So if I hide the plane, you can see it emitting all over the plane, but I want to emit it in somewhere in the middle and some small portions, random portions of a plane. So to do that, I'll right click on the plane, come to other tasks, and I'll add a polygon selection. In the polygon selection, I'll come to my field in here and I'll add a shader field. Select the shader field and change, come down here to the shader, click on it to add noise to it. Select the noise and let's actually visualize what's going on because we can't see our selection. So I come into my materials. I have this material I've already created. I'll add it to our plane and select the material in the selection tag. Let's drag in the polygon selection so that we see what's going on. You can see what our noise shader is doing. So let's come into the noise once again, change it to something like Booyah, and I think the global scale, I'll make it something like 250 and add a little bit of contrast in there, right? As much as I can. Let's increase the low and reduce the high, low clip and then reduce the high clip, right? And maybe reduce the octave to something like 3, and maybe let's change the randomness to something like change the seat to something that you feel like works. I think something like this is okay for me. So now I don't want it to emit it all over, so I want just the center. So I'll come into the polygon selection again, add a spherical field, right? Now make it a bit bigger, change it T, select the scale to make it something like this, right? And then I will come change the blend mode to clip, create another second sphere, and this time I'll set that one to subtract. So it's subtracting from all just the field that we have. Maybe I can make that one a little bit smaller, something like that. Okay, I think this is fine. With this you can actually adjust it anyhow you want it, but I just felt like I should do it this way. So now this is the selection that we are going to use to generate our particles. So let's come to the mesh emitter, and if we come into our emission mode, you set the surface and the restriction. Let's drag in our polygon selection, right? So now we can go ahead and hide our plane, and if we should hit play, I don't know how my mouse is messing me up. If I should hit play, you can see it generates at only the places where the selections were made. So that's what we want. So if we hit play over time, but there's no velocity anything, so we want to add forces, and the first force we want to add is the rotation force. So let's come into our forces. I add a rotation force. Let's make it a child of the particle group. In fact, let's select the particle group and the mesh emitter and drag it down. Now I'll call this particle group one. So the rotation, let's increase it to like 100, and let's rotate its coordinates like the pitch to 90. And now if you hit play, can see it generates and it's rotating, but it's moving together, so we want it to clamp together whilst it rotates. And to do that, I'll use a flock modifier. Make the flock modifier a child of particle group 1. Select the flock modifier and come to the flock tab. Let's increase the cohesion and strength to 10 and the radius to 10 as well, and reduce the separation radius as well as the separation strength as well. Let's reduce all of it a bit down at. So now if we hit play, we should have it rotating and some of them clamp together, right? And that's what we want. Let's increase our time frame to something like 900, right? And now you can see it's clamped together whilst rotating, right? But there's a lot of speed in it, so we can actually slow it down. And to do that, we use a friction force. So let's create a friction and let's increase it to like maybe 30, right? And that one will slow it down when it's playing, and now it makes it clamp properly. Now what we want to do is that whilst it rotates, after for some time, maybe after 60 frames, we want it to start moving towards our hat, right? And to do that, we use a condition. So after 60 frames, we want it to start moving towards our hat, and to do that, we use a condition like I said. So I'll create a condition, right? Drag the condition and make it a child of the particle group 1 after the rotation and the flock. Let's select the condition and the property, make sure it's set to age, right? And let's change the comparison from equals to greater than or equals, meaning after if the our frames is greater than 60 or equals to 60, it should start doing something, right? And what do we want it to do? We want it to move towards our heart shape, right? And to do that, we will use a field force. So let's come into our forces down here, and I'll create a field force, and I'll make, in fact, let's bring our hat, right, and select the field force. We want it to be somewhere in the middle of our hat. So actually, let me drag it and make it a child of the hat and zero out its coordinates, so we know it's in the center of our hat. And now let's drag it out of the hat and make it a child of the condition node, right? Let's hide the hat once again, and now let's select the field force, come to its object tab in the attributes, and drag in the hat object. You can see something is happening, right? We can increase for now. Let's go to the display, and so that we can visually see what's happening properly, right? You can see this what it's giving us. You can actually even make increase this box size to get it welcome, but this actually doesn't affect anything, it's just for display. So let's come here, let's increase its strength to something like 200. Now it looks very rough, so let's, in fact, first of all, let's select the hat, come down to the layers, and make sure it's set to the mode is set to surface, and then go to direction and change the length from use value to normalized, right? And this is what we want. So now we can go back to the display and uncheck all these things so that it doesn't distract us in the viewports. And if we hit play, everything will rotate, and after 60 frames it should be moving towards our object, but it looks like it's not. And I don't know if it's a bug or something, but one thing I've realized with the field force is that anytime I do that, if I have this problem and I sort of choose click back to the point and surface once again, it sort of refreshes or something, and now I think it should work, right? I think let's choose point and surface. You see now it's working, right? Sort of, I don't know if it's a refresh or something like that, but once it's playing, I click one of these modes and back to the surface, it starts working. But yeah, you can see now it's attracting it. So let's hit play. You can see at frame 60 start moving towards our hat object, and that's exactly what we want. But when it gets to the hat object, we want it to sort of move on the surface of the hat object, right? And now with that, we'll use surface attract. So let's create a surface attract, make it a child of the condition as well after the field force, and let's increase the attract strength to like 1000, right? And now the surface attract always need a collider tag or object with a collider tag to work. So let's right click on the hat, come to our simulation and add a collider tag, right? So now the surface attract actually sees this hat as the object is to attract to. So now let's select the surface attract. Okay, we already adjust the strength and everything. So now if we hit play, attract it and it gets there, it should move. We should be confident that it's moving on the surface of our hat, right? Now another thing I don't want is that when our object or our clamps get to the hat, we want it to be free, sort of separate from each other. It shouldn't be clamping forever. And with that, it means we have to switch the group. We switch group, right? Because in this particular group there's this flock which is doing the cohesion, so it will always keep it together. And so what I'll do is that in the surface attract, if you come down here, you can see switch on contact. So immediately our particle touches the surface attract, we can tell it to switch to a different group. So let's check switch on contact and create group. You can see you create group and it has created a group for us. Let's drag this group out and call it group 2, right? And in the group 2, this is where we will add 2 objects. So we still want it to keep it on the surface of our hat, right? So now it has switched group, and in this group there is no surface attract, so it wouldn't recognize it and start moving all over. You can see it's moving all over the place. So let's create another surface attract in this group so that it keeps it on the surface. And let's increase the strength of this one a lot to like 6000, a lot, right? And now another thing we want is that, like I said, I want it to separate from each other, right? I don't want it to clump together. To do that, we use the flock again and make it a child of the particle group 2, but this time the flock, we don't want the cohesion as much. Let's reduce the cohesion and all of those things, but what we want more is the separation. So let's set the separation to like 5, right? And let's see what happens if we hit play. It drags up and now you see it separates and starts forming our hat object. And that's basically the whole idea of how I did this, right? So now another thing I did, which not really necessary, but I wanted to add to the video, was to add a little bit of displace deformer to give the hat object some wobbly feel when the particle touches it, so that it adds to it. So what I did was to create a displace deformer, make it a child of the hat, right? Select the displace and come to shading, and now change it to color, right? And now you can see if let me bring the hat, you can see it makes it big. If I disable the display, it makes it something like bigger, right? But we don't want it to affect it the whole at once. We want it to affect where the particle touches, which is the particle group 1. So what I'll do is I'll select the display and then I'll come to fields and we'll drag in the particle group 1, right? And you can see where it touches, it sort of gives it this bulge. I actually even went in to the remapping to adjust this to curve, to adjust the shape of how it sort of looks and all of those things. You can actually do all of those things to get the kind of shape and all of that, but basically you get the idea, right? And now let me add another deformer, which is jiggle deformer, to give it that jiggleness or secondary bounce. So let's come to the jiggleness and reduce the stiffness way down and even the structure. So let's see what that gives us, right? Hit play, and initially it looks like it's slowing down, but it'll start playing smoothly when it starts rising. Yeah, so now when it gets there, it will give it that jiggle and bouncy feel like that a little bit to add to the interest. So that's something I added. maybe you can ignore that. But let me for now disable the jiggle and the displays so that we continue on the main idea. So now you see everything is working fine. Let me play once again. It goes up on the surface and you can see it's free, it resets, and now it's moving on the surface of the hat. Let's go ahead and hide the hat once again, and now it forms it. But we don't want the particles to emit forever, so at frame, let's select the mesh emitter, come to the rate at frame 0. Let's set a keyframe for the rate, and at frame, let's say maybe 200, or at frame maybe 180, we can set it to 0. We don't want it to emit. We can actually set it to range. We can use range, which it tell us it should emit within a certain range. But in this particular case, I intentionally wanted to keyframe it for this purpose, right? So it can emit from frame 0 up to frame 180, and there it will stop emitting, right? And now all the particles will be formed. It depends on your object and everything. You can make it last longer. I think in the original one it lasted longer than this one, right? But just to give you an idea, and now the hat is formed, right? And it's well attracted, and it's fairly covering our object. I can actually add, let's say, a turbulence in here to add a little bit of interest to the motion. Let's add a turbulence and add a scale to it, maybe 30 of the scale, to add a little bit more visual interest and stuff like that. All these, I mean, depends on what you want, right? So now we can see some of the particles are getting away, and what I did to avoid that is I created a killed first of all, I took the hat. See this hat, right? I created a second version of it, but I use an instance object. So I come in here and I'll create instance object, right? Select the instance object, and that's a copy of the hat that I've created. If I select it and press E and move it, you can see I've created a copy of the hat, but we are going to use it to kill any particle that sort of pass a certain level. So now in this particle group 2, let's create a field condition, right? A field condition, and make it a child after everything, the turbulence, right? Select the field condition, and the field condition, what we want to use is the instance object, this particular instance. Let's drag it in, and now let's set it to volume. So meaning everything within the volume of this instance hat that we've created should be like should do something, right? And what do we want it to do? Kill everything that's in the volume. So let's create a kill modifier, make it a child of the field condition. So at this moment, it's going to kill anything that's in the volume, that gets into the volume of this particular hat instance. So everything here will be killed, right? But we want it the other way around. Everything should be kept and everything outside be killed, right? So now let's select the instance, the how do you call it, the field condition once again, and come to remap, and let's select the remap and say invert. Right now it's going to kill everything that's generated, immediately gets to particle 2, so it will be the same thing. See, it killing everything, it doesn't even get the chance to get to the volume. So we will activate it at a certain point. So for now, let's select the instance, right? And let's bring it back. The instance, like, actually but it's on the same, basically on the same plane with the hat itself. We want to sort of make it a bit larger, slightly larger than the hat itself, and to do that you can use another deformer, which is the displace deformer, right? Where is it? Displace, make it a child of the instance. Come here and shader, let's set it to color, right? And it offsets it 10 centimeters, so you can see. So it's the same copy, but we've just made it bigger. Same copy of the hat, which we've added the display to make it. So we can, I don't want the high, I want it something like 2, slightly 2 centimeters, or maybe 3 if you want, right? Now you can go ahead and hide it, and now you can hide that hat as well. So what we will do with the instance is that after everything is formed, now we can activate the kill, the field modifier, or the kill, either of them. So for now, we don't want the kill to start working, so let's set it to 0, right? And now let's hit play, right? And everything will form as we want. Everything will be fine. So now that everything is in there, we know everything has formed. Now we can set a keyframe for the chance, and maybe at this frame we can set it back to 100, right? And now everything that falls outside of the hat will be killed, and you are sure no particle will be wandering around when we don't want it. So that's basically how I did that. Now the next part is to basically remesh it. So I'll come in here and I'll create a volume builder, select the volume builder, and drag in both our particles, particle group 1 and particle group 2, right? And let's select the volume builder and reduce the voxel size to 1, right? And you can add a smooth on top of it, but like select the particle group 1, reduce the radius to like maybe 5, and the particle group 2, let's reduce it to like 3, right? So let's hit play. This will actually slow, so let me actually, okay, let's hit play to see how it pans out. It will be very slow. So for now, let me disable the volume, and now when built to a certain level, we can enable check the volume builder to see how it looks. You can actually play with this till you get something you want. You can just select the SDF smooth and add a little bit of iteration to give it a bit more smooth. You can also reduce the strength to something, to play with all of these, the volume, the voxel distance, iteration, and the strength. Play with it to eventually get something that you feel like it works. So that's basically it. So let's play to a certain point, and now we can add volume builder here. You can see everything is forming, and yeah, exactly what I did, right? And now it forms our object. Let me disable it, hit play for everything to form, and now we are good. Right now, there's something I did, even though in this particular example that I'm showing, it's not coming up as much, but in the original, let me actually select the particle group 2 and reduce the radius to like 2. Okay, no, I think the 3 is fine, but let me select the turbulence and increase it. I think the turbulence 2 is fine. Let me reduce it to like 25, and the turbulence to like 7, and also add a little bit. Okay, the friction is also fine. And one thing we can also do with the surface attractors, with the second surface attractors, we can actually add a little bit of dampening to reduce the energy, right? So that it slows down over time. Let's disable it and hit play one more time before I go to show how I added the MoGraph aspect of this thing. So you can see it forms and everything is looking fine, right? Yeah. So now this is basically it. In this particular scenario, we are not having a lot of, let me enable this, a lot of holes in it, so it can work fine. But my original video, the initial one that I did, that one, there were some parts full. For instance, up here you can see it's sort of hollow and it's not well meshed. So what I did, sort of backup to avoid any hollow places in the process, was to add a secondary version, which is using MoGraph to fill up the whole thing. And to do that, what I did was to, first of all, before I do that, let me actually bake the particles, right? So if I select, disable the mesh and select these two particles, you can actually bake it. So to bake or to cache it, so to cache particle, all you have to do is select the particle groups and click cache, and it will ask you to name the particles and where you want to save it. So I'll quickly do that. So my particles have been cached, and you can see now I can move the playhead and everything moves plays smoothly. But there's some small adjustment that I did in here which I didn't show. Is after the whole thing was comes in, right, in the particle group 2, the flock, After everything is formed here, I sort of keyframe them, the separation radius, so that some of them can clamp together, and you see you have those spaces. And that's where, if I add a volume object, you can see we have these inner spaces in there, right? And that's where the MoGraph comes in handy. So now that we have our particle cached, we can actually use it to also do something else. So now, one thing a lot of people don't know is that you can actually deform your particles after it's cached. So now I can go ahead and disable the volume builder. And now with the particle group 1, which is the one coming up, this is the particle group 1, the ones from down here. You see the way it's going up, we like, right? But I want to sort of give it a little bit of bulge, like not bulge as in curvy in, right, like that, and we use the bulge deformer. So I'll select the particle group and come to my deformers. Let me actually bring it somewhere here. Come to my deformers, and I'll create a bulge deformer and make it a child of a particle group 1, right? Select the bulge and say fit to parent, and you can see it's fitting to the parent. And if you come to the front view like that, everything is set. Let's give it a little bit of space, and so something like this should be fine. And now if we hit increase the strength, you can see it's bulging it, and you can also use this to sort of decrease it, something like this, right? So we like how it is, but I don't like the sharp transition at the top here. So I'll use a field. So I'll select the bulge and come to field, and I'll create a linear field, set it to -y, and now let's move it somewhere up here. All right, something like this. Yeah, something like this is fine. With the linear field, you can actually even come to the remap and sort of adjust the shape. So I can set this one to curve, and now set a little bit of, to give it a little bit of smoothness and everything, not sharp right from the edge. So you can play with a lot of things. So basically, I use the bulge deformer to sort of give it that curvy feel of our particles. And the reason why it's deforming our particles is that when you cache your particles, it's basically now points. If I select the particle group 2 and come to points, you can see it's all points. That's actually, so it's easy to use deformers on them, right? Let's go back to object, and now everything plays like how we want. Now what we want to do is that if we bring back our hat object, right, we can right click on the hat, add other tags, vertex map to the hat, and select the vertex map, and come to, why is it hidden, properties. Can that when you open, click on this and open it, you can check use transfer, and in there we have freeze. Let's leave the freeze there and add our particle group 1 to it, and you can see now it's giving us this yellowish thing, right? So let's select the vertex map again, come to the freeze, and in the freeze, first of all, let's clear and change the mode from to growth, right? The mode to growth, and now let's reduce the growth strength to like say 7, and maybe even the radius like maybe 8, right? And what is doing that, wherever the particle touches, it will start growing the vertex map from there. So if you go back and hit play, right, you can actually move this somewhere up here, and now it should grow. Oh, actually, so what you have to do is select the particle group here, the mode, let's set it from normal to either max or add, right? And either of them should work. So if I come here, let's drag it forward a bit, and now hit play, you can see now our particles are growing from there, right? So you can see the vertex map is growing underneath our object, and that's, in fact, you can reduce the vertex map growth effect strength to like even 5, right? So now that we have that, we can use that to drive a matrix object. So let's come in here and create a matrix, select the matrix and come to the object tab, change it from the mode to object from grid, and then the object we want to, our our matrix to be on the surface is obviously the hat. So let's drag in the hat, right? Let's hide the hat, and now let's increase our matrix as much as we want, right? So we can make it to the point where it covers the surface. But one thing is that this hat has a lot of segments, right? If I disable it, display the segments, so I can actually use that the edges. Every edge will have a matrix and it will fill the surface well enough. So I can, instead of using the surface, I'll just set edge, and every edge will have a matrix and it will fairly cover our hat very well. So with that, we select the matrix and add a plane effector. Select the plane effector and come to parameters. We don't want to affect position, but rather scale. So let's check the scale and check the uniform as well. Let's set the scale to -1. And now in the fields, let's actually drag in the vertex map of the hat on the hat. Let's drag it in here. And now you can see it starts like that. If we drag it forward a bit and hit play, rather it's actually hiding, like as sort of dissolving our vertex matrix object instead of revealing it, right? Rather hiding it sort of. So we want it the other way around. If you hit play, you can see it's hiding it, but we want it to reveal it rather. And to do that is as simple as selecting the plane and come to the parameters and change it from relative, the transform mode, to from relative to remap, and now it will reveal it rather. So we'll do the other way around, right? So that's basically all that we do. And with that, I can simply select the matrix object, select the volume builder and drag in the matrix object as well. You can drag it down. Now you can hide the matrix, you don't want to see it. And that one, what we have to do is select the matrix object. Where is it? Matrix object. Let's drag it down in the volume builder, and you, instead of using the radius, let's check use particle size, and now it will actually use the particle size, how it scales in and everything, right? So now if we go and hit play, I don't like the, okay, everything is fine in here. So click plays. We are not seeing what's happening. If we enable our volume builder, yeah, you can see it's coming in, and we are rest assured that there will be no hollow places or anything like that, because the matrix will come in to fill it and everything will be completely smooth for us. So that's basically how I did the whole thing, right? Now the next thing is how I actually rendered it basically. So let me quickly walk through that, and I used Redshift for that. So what I did is, right now, that let's play it a bit to get, in fact, let me disable the volume builder and hit play for us to get the whole thing. Maybe, okay, let's drag it down somewhere here so that we have fairly some things happening. So let's see, this is it. Now let's bring our volume builder and create our volume measure. So I'll come into my volume and I'll add volume measure, make the volume builder a child of the volume measure, and now we have our mesh, which you can actually add textures and things to it. Select the volume measure, right click on the volume measure, and I'll add a vertex map to it, right? Select the vertex mapper on the vertex map on the volume measure, and now let's drag in the volume mesh inside the vertex map again, right? Select the volume mesh and change the mode from point to curvature, and we have some selections made around, and this is purely for artistic, something give me dynamic difference, like in terms of the materials, right? So you can actually even create a second vertex map and you drag this one in to smoothen it properly and all of that, but for now it's fine. So with this, all I did was to create a redshift material, right? Come to my materials, now create a material. I don't know why I'm having this issue with these black materials, I don't know, but I have a redshift material, right? And now create another double click here to create a material blender. Oh, actually, let me type blender, and you can see you have a material blender in here. So our first material, I should have even dragged it in straight. So our first material will go into the base color, and this one will go here, right? So you can double click to create another material. So you can see you have another material created, right? And this material, what I did is I chose gold. You know, you come to the preset, you have gold here, and now I chose gold, and that one will go into the material layer 2. Actually select this one and come into the transmission, and I'll set it to 1. So this one is basically glass. All right, unfortunately the preview of my material keeps giving me this. I don't know if what's the problem, but it keeps showing this black stuff. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. But for now, let's work and see. So now that I have these two material, we need this vertex map, right, to tell it where it should show. So I'll double click here and create a vertex attribute, and select the vertex attribute. In here where the vertex name is, you can actually drag in a vertex map, and now we can drag this vertex map to the blend color layer of the layer 1, right? You can also create a ramp. Let me actually create a ramp and drag it in between this to sort of give it a black and white shade. So that's what basically going to use to control our material. So now let's drag our material on our volume measure, and now can quickly add in any HDRI to see what we have. And let me actually bring my redshift render view, right, and hit render to see what we have so far. We can actually hide our particles because we don't want to see the particles in this case. So you can see we have something happening. So if you add in like an HDRI light or anything, so I'll come to asset browser and I'll look for an HDRI, maybe, I think just any of them, just for the sake of the tutorial. If I drag it in out in 2025, you can see if you drag in an HDRI into your scene, it automatically creates a RS dome with the texture in it, right? We don't want to see the background, we just want it. So you can see now it's some part of our object is glass, and where it's yellow is giving us this gold feel, right? So what I did was to add a little bit of thin film shader. Bring back, select the first one, material, and come down here, and I added thin film to like added something, increase it a little bit, right? Something like this. Yeah, played around with it to get some sort of thing I wanted. And that's basically all that I did, right, to get this particular feel, right? And the rest was to add a quick camera animation, and the camera animation was quite simple. I can quickly show that as well. All I did was to, let's say at frame 0, let's first of all disable the volume and everything and bring back our particles. We want to see what's happening. Let's say at frame 0, I set this particular angle at frame 0, and let me create a camera, right? At frame 0, I did something like this. At frame 0, let's select particle, something like this at frame 0. So let's set a keyframe, select our camera, set a keyframe, right? It's actually keyframe everything, but it's fine. Auto keyframing at frame, let's say this particular at frame 150. I want it somewhere here, right? Somewhere here, right? And I'll set it because auto keyframe is on. I think it should be setting a keyframe for us automatically, and at frame maybe 300 where everything is showing. I want the whole thing. Zoom everything out. maybe something like that. It's basically normal camera animation, no fancy stuff. And that's it. And all I did also, I think I added a little bit of bank in here like that, right? So you start something like that, and then it keeps moving to eventually reveal the whole thing, right? That's basically all. I wasn't anything fancy. So basically, this is how I did the whole thing. If I actually come to the um, scene itself, you can see this is the whole setup with some light and all of that. And another few couple of things I did that I didn't show is with the I added a bit of camera lens effect to um when I rendered it actually. So let me show. If I come to my Redshift render view and I hit render in here, can see it has a little bit of depth of field, like which is bokeh, and then a little bit of glow to give it an interesting look. So if I select the RS camera and come to my optical tab, you can see bokeh. I have bokeh checked, and the aperture is set to 0.3, but I keyframe it over time. I added some keyframe at some point where I feel like it's too it's not, we are not getting a bit of proper clearance, it looks too blurry. I reduce it or increase it over time. The same thing applies to the lens effect. All I did was to change the bloom to override, and the threshold I reduced it a bit and keyframed it over time where I feel like it's too much and all of that. So that's basically all that I did. Yeah, so I hope this video was useful and you've learned a thing or two. I'm actually trying to figure out a way where how I can actually upload project files of the things I've done, so that maybe if you don't get something in the tutorial, you can probably dissect the project itself and get something out of it. So hopefully very soon I'll actually come up with a place where I have all my project file uploaded anytime I upload a tutorial, and that will be good for everyone. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.